America K. Well, howdy everybody. My name's America. I am an alcoholic. This is so friggin' exciting. I can't even express to you how happy I am to be around people. The pandemic, I was supposed to speak in 2020, and sadly things got canceled and life got put on hold. And then there was Zoom. And, if you love Zoom, I love that you love Zoom. And I certainly attended a lot of Zoom meetings, but the best way I can describe what that experience was like for me is that Zoom meetings are a little bit like porn. It'll get the job done, but it's not as good as live action. So that's that. And them's the facts. All right. Okay, number one, I want to thank the committee. This is like, dealing with alcoholics is like herding cats. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like to be able to coordinate something like this is just shy of miraculous, and the effort, I don't know what the experience of the committee is, but I can tell you as someone who's just been attending, it looks like it's going like clockwork. And I'm extremely grateful for the committee, so thank you. And, and the other people that should probably be acknowledged is the people who do the taping. That's serious work to do that, and for them to turn around and have copies 30 minutes afterwards is a little bananas in my book. So thank you for them, and I'd like to thank the staff of the hotel as well with putting up with us alcoholics. So thanks. All right then. Okay, the other thing I want to say is this. I was taught in Alcoholics Anonymous that I am not supposed to plan what I say, because if I do, that's about ego. And instead, I'm supposed to pray and ask God to help me speak to the one person in this room that needs to hear something really important to them. And if anybody else gets something out of what I have to say, that's just icing on the cake for me. And, when it tells us that we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, I'm here to tell you that our pain has purpose. It is so much more than not regretting the past. We have the ability to touch people's lives in a way that is miraculous. And do I look okay? Okay. All right then. All right. It's like my worst nightmare right now. Okay. All right, let me just do this. My sobriety date is July 15th, 1991. And thank that guy. And the longer I am sober, the more I need to hear recovery. So and also it's worth noting that when I drank, 99% of the time I was in a blackout. But what I can tell you is this is the person that came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 3 weeks after my 19th birthday. I was drinking a gallon of vodka every 2.5 days, coming out of blackouts, driving other people's cars, because I already lost mine. And at that point, I'd already spent half of my life in active addiction. And I was, as we say, tore up from the floor up. I didn't want what I had. And as the book describes, I was beat into a state of reasonableness. And that's important because the things that they asked, if you would have asked me a day before, I would have told you no. But I didn't know that I was an alcoholic until the day I got sober. Some people drink and, know that you're alcoholic. I don't understand that. That's not my experience. Also, functioning alcoholics is also another thing that really baffles me. When I got sober, we are beyond human aid. That's this program, right? But God does work through people, and for a 19-year-old punk that rolls into Alcoholics Anonymous, because even if you're not an alcoholic and a newcomer, You still know everything when you're 19 years old. And my old timers, I owe my life to the old timers of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, some people describe AA, they come in, they're like, I felt at home. It was like a warm hug. I did feel comfortable. I identified immediately with what people were talking about, but these old timers is exactly what a 19-year-old punk needed. And, they would tell me things like, we don't care how you feel, we care what you do. The first meeting I ever went to was a big book study, and during the meeting, they passed around a big book unbeknownst to me, and every single person there wrote their name and number in it. And at the end of the meeting, they gave it to me and they said, there's another meeting here tomorrow, but it's upstairs. If you call somebody here at least 2 hours before the meeting, we'll come pick you up and we'll take you home, because I lost my car already. And then they took me to dinner. And they sat me in this U-shaped booth. And I was right in the middle. And then there were these people talking to me. And I didn't want to go because I didn't have any money. And they're like, don't worry about it. We're buying. And they just dragged me there. It's sort of like I didn't have an option. But again, beat into a state of reasonableness. And, we were there for several hours, but I'll tell you the big thing that I walked away with is that, A, I had some hope. And B, I remember this one line. They said, look, if you have an alcoholic horse thief and you take away the alcohol, you still have a horse thief. AA and the steps works on the horse thief. And that just totally made sense to me, because I knew that when I wasn't drinking, I was always scheming to drink. And I'm like a purist. I'm a pure alcoholic. I don't have drugs in my story. And I was just very thirsty at all times. And so I grew up, also I just relocated, by the way, to San Diego, which is where I got sober. And so I now have a new home group there. It's called the Stick Meeting, because they have these popsicle sticks or whatever, and have first step, 11th step, whatever, lines out of the book, and then you draw that, and that's what your personal topic is to share. Everybody gets a stick. And there's a lot of old timers, and I was sitting in that meeting, and I had been going to meetings in San Diego for a little bit of time, and I kept just sharing. I was taught, I need a posse. We hang together or we die alone. And I just didn't have my people yet. And although I got sober in San Diego's enormous. And so my old home group is 35 minutes from my house. And so I'm sitting in this meeting. It's a noon meeting. And there's a lot of old timers there, which is, I'm like, where are old timers going to meetings? And so I ended up at this meeting, and it's my very first meeting, and they need a new secretary. And they alternate men, women. There's a woman. And they said, well, we've asked every man in here, and nobody wants to do it. And some lady volunteers, but she doesn't meet the sobriety requirement, which was a big deal because it's at a church and you have a key to the church. And so I'm sitting there, and my head is like, this would work perfectly with your schedule. You don't want to do that, though. I mean, come on, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do it. 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 My name is America. I'm an alcoholic. I'll be your new secretary. And because I was taught in Alcoholics Anonymous that contrary action is where it's at, and that faith without works is dead. And by the way, because I don't plan, I literally am going to be just as surprised as you are when I hear the recording, and I'm going to be all over the place. That will be a promise. So I grabbed the commitment because I needed a commitment. And for the last many years, my commitments have been sponsoring. And you're going to hear the only authority. Okay, so this is a third edition book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It has the Serenity prayer on it. And so if you hear one thing I hear today, this is the thing to listen to. You find somebody that knows this book, and you sit down with them, and you let them read it to you line by line. If you don't know a word, you look it up. When you get to a step, you work it. It is the single most important thing you'll do. I was told that when I got here, all the answers to every problem I'm ever going to have is in this book. And I am an information junkie. And I like to know things. And so, there was in this other speakers, by the way, the other speakers have been phenomenal. Yay for everybody. I'm like, there's so much love, in this world, I can't even believe it. And my higher power, is, if I had to sum it up, is unconditional love. And when I got here, just brief backstory of sort of my background. So I was a very late bloomer, and when I was in school, I was bullied terribly. My name's America. I'm blind in one eye, not very good at sports. I was the smartest kid in class, and pretty much any reason that you could go after a kid, I had that happening for me, and it was pretty relentless. And the book talks about abandoning your old ideas completely. And so I will talk about things out of the book. I will talk about my experience as it relates to the book. I will give you some of my opinions, and there are some things that I just know are facts. And the fact is that when I had to abandon my old ideas, I remember when I was in 3rd grade and kids were really being mean to me. They used to, sing America the Ugly to me. And I still feel sad when that happens. People tell me now that I'm beautiful, and I have to tell you is that Alcoholics Anonymous made me pretty. I learned how to really play with makeup during the pandemic because of those effing Zoom meetings. And holy God, for looking at yourself on Zoom, first thing happened, I bought a ring light. I'm like, this is not happening. I can't not look at myself. And then I'm watching these makeup tutorials, and I'm like, maybe I could try that, and now I have skills. I have mad skills. It's like I'm a special effects artist, okay? I didn't wear any makeup when I got on the plane. My host with the most, Matt, who's doing just a fine job, I told him, I said, you're not going to recognize me tomorrow. And he just sort of kind of blew that off. And then I show up the next day. He opens the door and he's like, oh my God, look at you. Oh God. But when I was being bullied in 3rd grade, I remember having this thought in my head, which was, if they got to know you, I know that they would like you. And I really believed that. And then the bullying continued and the bullying continued. I have one sister, only one sibling. Her name's Tiffany. And she's like, oh my God, so Tiffany, like anything you could imagine a Tiffany could be, that's my sister. And in the house, she was the pretty one and I was the smart one. And I'm literally, I have walked down the street with my sister and guys were rubbernecking as they were going by and some guy crashed in the car in front of them. That's the kind of beauty that my sister. And, but I was never jealous of her because I just sort of felt like this is the hand that I was dealt. You know what I mean? And plus my sister was so kind and loving. I had this ideal relationship with my sister growing up. And when I was in 4th grade, I stopped playing on the playground at lunch. I would eat lunch and then I would come back and I would just sit in line because it was dangerous for me out there. Kids were really mean. And the only thing that I could do that would make me feel even a little bit important was that if I could at least be first in line, that was something. And it was so funny because when we were walking in there, they're like, you're last in line. I'm like, that's right, I am last in line and that's okay now. And, but I was just devastated and I felt so lonely and I was crying because someone was especially mean to me that day. And, Where I was sitting, my sister's classroom was right there. They had lunch after us, and she saw me crying. And she comes out, and she sits next to me. And she was rocking me, and she said, if these people just get to know you, they would love you the way I do. And I said, no, I think there's something wrong with me. And that is kid logic. I formed an old idea right then and there because I had such limited life experience, and I could only draw one conclusion, that there must be something wrong with me. And that's the person that came into Alcoholics Anonymous, completely broken. And when I drank, I still to this day, because I bought by the gallon, I don't know how big a fifth is. I still don't. I just know that whatever I looked at, the one that was the gallon size, it had a handle. I'm like, that's what's up, and later they started, I used to drink Pop-Off too. Jeez, good Lord, it was the cheapest I could get a hold of. And I was a volume drinker. I mean, truly, I binge drank. I was the first person at Arizona State to drink themselves to blood poisoning or alcohol poisoning. I had a 0.3 blood alcohol level, and won a shot contest against a really wussy linebacker who can suck it to this day. I still won that contest, and at the end of my drinking, my very last drunk, I will say that at noon that day, I come to, and my two girlfriends are like dragging me into a bedroom. I'm like, what happened? They're like, you passed out in the jacuzzi. And I'm like, oh, well, all right then. And so I laid down, then they went back out to lay out in the sun. And the world was spinning, so naturally I hurled and felt much better. And then the thought comes to me, these guys just don't know how to drink. And at the end of my drinking, I was really drinking with Navy guys because they were the only ones who could keep up. And my last drunk, I came to at 1 o'clock in the morning or something with my head in a toilet again. And, which makes, and that's so funny, right? Because everybody's so germophobic. I'm like, do you know you? I'm like, people like doing lines off of like toilet seats and truck stops and stuff, and suddenly it's like, where's my hand sanitizer? There is a little bit of a jackass that lives in here, so, and I'm really going to try not to swear, but I don't plan, so, when you stub your toe, darn doesn't seem to cover it. And so sobriety was a series of emotional toe stubbings for a long while, it seemed like, and so I really try not to, but I also need to not plan what I'm saying, so I'm making a pre-amends. All right, then. And so there was this Navy guy that was sitting there. There's a bunch of passed out people, and he's like, he said, I come out and it's all dark and just his glowing cigarette. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, I was just making sure you were okay. And then the next day, I was still drunk at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had accidentally kept my boss's car for like 3 days. And I lied, and was able to keep my job. The most fantastical story as to how I disappeared off the face of the planet for 3 days with their car. And I had, my folks are still married. They're both still living, fortunately. And, but I grew up with an astronomical amount of daddy issues. My dad is a narcissist. I'm not here to talk to you what that's all about, but if you want to do some reading, that's a good read. And I didn't diagnose that. Therapists were like, yeah, your dad's narcissistic. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's important. What it was that everything on the outside needed to look okay because he was shattered inside and he didn't even know it. And so my sister and I used to get weighed when we were growing up, and just so that we would be in the number range that he thought was okay. And, there was some beatings in my life. I had a beating when I was 16 that was so bad it took 2 months for the bruises to completely go away. And when I did my first 4-step, I had 28 pages of resentments against my father. And I'll tell you that if you have daddy issues when you're growing up, when you are a grown-up, you have who's your daddy issues. That I can promise you. And I had to really do a lot of work. The book talks about how there's a lot of therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and things that are like happy to help us. And I had to take advantage of that because I had a lot of trauma. And not just from my dad. I had a lot of trauma from just growing up, kids just being really mean. And but my old timers had this balance of being tough but not mean. And they would be the first people that would pull me onto their lap and let me sob my guts out. And then I would also skip up to them and go, because I could I had a hard time. It took me 7 years to get a sponsor I could really do business with. I still had sponsors, but I could talk them into bad ideas. I could convince them of anything. And then I would go skipping into the meeting like, guess what I'm going to do? Because I think I inherently knew what I was doing was not right. And then they would just look at me like I had a plunger on my forehead. And they're like, what are you, effing stupid? I'm like, maybe. So maybe not, right? And I don't know why I could hear them, but I couldn't hear the sponsor. And I still did the steps. I still went through that. But the most important thing that I learned about my alcoholism on the onset was taught to me by my old timers. And, in truth, I was like consistently sponsored by my old timers. And I told them everything. And they walked me through, and I've heard this talked about, but I'm going to talk about it because it was the single most important thing that I learned. I was really under the delusion that I liked to party. I really did. I was at one point known as the Party Palace Princess, and I started calling everybody dude at that time because I couldn't remember you and I can't remember what I did. And I really thought that I just, I don't know. Some people say they came to AA and they just wanted a break or whatever. I really understood that I couldn't drink, but I don't remember having a conscious thought like, I'm coming to AA to stop drinking. I remember in my moment of clarity, I'm driving and I'm getting off the freeway. I've been thrown out of my parents' house. I burned every sofa that let me sleep on there. And I have this moment of clarity, and it's like, do you realize that literally every single problem you're having in your life right now is because you're drinking, and it's not because you're dad? And I was like, crap. So I got home, start going through the phone book because it was that long ago. We didn't even have cell phones back then. We had pagers. And if you moved, you had to get a new sponsor. That was like, because, you wouldn't see. I'm so glad we have cell phones. And, I have 47,000 thoughts going through my head right now. And I'm sitting here trying to suss out what's the most important thing, and I really don't know. And that's pretty common for what's going on for me. But my old timers told me that horse thief issue that they had introduced me to, they said the reason that's a problem for us is because of the cycle of addiction. And the cycle of addiction is in the doctor's opinion. And so I'll read the paragraph that helped really change my life. It said, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. This sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So here is the cycle of addiction as it was taught to me. So we start off and we're restless, irritable, and discontented. Unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks they see others taking with impunity, after we have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops. We go through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again, and it says this is repeated over and over again, and unless we experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of our recovery. Then came the quiz. What's the most important part of that? Well, the thing that was the most surprising thing out of that for me was the phenomenon of craving. And so I'm like, phenomenon of craving? And they're like, no. Restless irritability and discontentment starts it. And that's why you have to work the steps. And so, as it was explained to me, I'm just going to blow through this really quickly. Steps 1, 2, and 3, I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. Okay? Steps 4 through 9 handle all of the restless irritability, discontentment I am carrying around from my past. 10, 11, and 12 help me deal with my restless irritability and discontentment today. And, you know, I was so stuck in the past, you know, I would have these reactions that didn't match. If it's hysterical, it's a historical. And so if my situation doesn't match the situation at hand, it's not about the situation at hand. And, you know, the disease of alcoholism, not swearing, is an effing serial killer. It wants me dead. And when I try to, you know, my God, I'm going to tell you what it means to me. My God wants me to be happy, healthy, joyous, and free in an unselfish way. And if I'm getting any other information that doesn't lead to that, it's coming from the disease. It's that black and white for me. And so when my head would start on me, and then I would just continuously abandon myself and not advocate for myself. It's like when that's happening, it's like a serial killer who like walks up to you, doesn't have a weapon, but they're like, you know what? I got this van over here. What if you get in the back and let me hog tie you and take you to another location? And I'm sitting here going, maybe. I don't know. That seems like maybe a good idea. And that's what happens when I entertain the disease for me. I wouldn't take life advice from a serial killer. So I'm not going to listen to what my head has to say. And all I know is that I had to use a lot of tools in the beginning to begin to quiet that. Sometimes I'd have to say, I have a memory of when I was at work and I had like 90 days sober. And I was a waitress at Denny's, which I didn't think I'd be capable of doing, but I ended up doing pretty well at it. And I had to say the Serenity Prayer for 8 hours if I wasn't taking an order or putting an order in the computer. I had to say this. I could not get my head, I couldn't get the assault to stop. And that was the only tool that I had at the time. And it worked. And then I would stop, and then I might get 3 seconds, and then it would start again. And, you know, the power in being able to identify who's giving me information is really important. And I had a pretty significant spiritual experience when I was 3 years sober. And naturally, I was in a fetal position crying about a boy. And I didn't understand the historical thing, but I was sobbing my guts out. It really didn't match the situation. And I was absolutely inconsolable, and I was all by myself. And no one was home. And I pulled the covers over and got real tight. And in that moment, I felt a hand come behind me and hug me. I was so scared I looked over my shoulder. And then I heard these words as clear as day, as if I am talking to you. And I know this to be the voice of God. And God said, I will never give you more than you can handle. You are safe and protected. Even on your worst day, I am proud of you. Even on your worst day, you can never let me down. You are already the woman I know you to be. And I'm just waiting for you to get out of the way and see it. I was never okay. I was never okay. I never knew that I was safe when I was having my feelings. And now I really do know that I'm never given more than I can handle. The only evidence I need is that I am yet to have a feeling come up that has caused me to burst into flames. I've also never seen it happen to someone else. That's all the evidence I really need. You know, and there's this like delusional fear that the disease wants me to hold on to, that somehow if I start to experience that pain, that it's going to like be forever. I mean, I'm not still laughing at a joke from like my dad told me, a dad joke from second grade. You know what I mean? Like, it's temporary. And here's the truth. I have never gained 5 pounds feeling my feelings, but I have trying to avoid my feelings. And to know that under all circumstances I am safe and protected is unbelievable to me. I feel comfortable in my own skin. I not only love myself, I actually like who I am. And, you know, the book talks about, you know, when all else fails, work with another alcoholic saves the day, right? No, it does not say, when all else fails, go volunteer at the animal shelter or go help your parents with yard work. And I hear this, you know, what people, I was being of service to my family. No, you were making a living amends to your family. And so when we talk about service, we talk about service to other alcoholics. And I was brought up in AA, if it's not inconvenient, it's not service. And, you know, okay, so following is my opinion. You know, that people, they say, you know, just pray to be willing to be willing. Seriously? By a show of hands, how many people here have been arrested? Keep your hands up. Who's gone to school and didn't want to go? Who's paid taxes? This proves one very important thing. Willingness is not a prerequisite to take action. Action is the prerequisite to taking action. You know, my old timers, they, you know, I get accused of being a bit of a book thumper and a little bit militant, but you know, I have to be that way, because if I give the disease even this much space, it's just going to run the show. And, you know, my pain and the things, I've grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new, by the way, if your head has told you at any point, I'm standing here, I'm 50 years old, I have 31 years of sobriety. And if your head right now at some point says, I wish I would have been able to get sober sooner, let me tell you something. We have no control over when God taps us on the shoulder and says it's time. We don't have that. That's not in our purview. I went to a meeting one time, and there was a 93-year-old man who took a 90-day token. It was the very first time he ever came to Alcoholics Anonymous 90 days before that. You know, the thing about, you know, steps 6 and 7, when you get through the steps and then you kind of, really, okay, now practicing the principles in all my affairs, okay, I'll tell you what I tell my sponsees. If you were confused about what the 7th step really is about and the willingness as it relates to step 6, I was a little concerned. So given my upbringing, I had a small rage issue when I came here. And, leveling people. I was known as machete mouth when I was out there, okay? So, I don't, and I told this woman that I wanted to get rid of my rage, but I was afraid because it was the only thing I knew how to do to take care of myself, push somebody away from me. And she goes, honey, we're not going to tell you to stop doing one thing and not teach you some other stuff instead that works better. And that's the essence of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. We don't tell you that, some people do. Don't drink, put the plug in the jug. Okay, fine, that's great and all, but you know what? In the spiritual experience, it talks about that it's a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. What is that? What do we have you do instead? Go to meetings, have commitments, work the steps. That's what's up. And in that, we get to have a spiritual experience. And if you're struggling with God, I feel your pain. I was almost an atheist by the time I walked in here. And here's what I can tell you. The single most important relationship in my entire life is with my higher power. And how do you get there? So Cactus Jack, my 412-year-old old-timer, that man was amazing. When I had 90 days sober, I went to breakfast with my dad. And when he dropped me off, he said, I'm not proud of you and I'm ashamed to have you as a daughter. And I have to tell you, all I ever wanted was that man's approval. But you can't transmit something that you haven't got, right? He couldn't even approve of himself. How is he going to give it to me? What I learned in recovery was that approval and that love has to come from God, and there's things that I can learn to do differently that help me nurture myself. So that when I do have pain, I'm never alone. I'm safe and I'm protected. But I got to tell you, when my dad told me that, I had him drop me off at Cactus Jack's house. And I didn't cry, which I don't know how, but it was absolutely the single biggest injury that I could think to receive from my father. And I went into Cactus Jack's house just absolutely sobbing. And he had me sit on his lap. And he just rocked me. And he said, honey, you don't have enough skills to be around someone like that right now. You need to practice on us people here. We're safe. There will come a time where you will have enough skills to deal with somebody like that, but it's not today. And when the book tells us that we have to cease fighting everything and everyone, that includes God's plan and God's timing. My unhappiness in life is when I have a delta between what God is giving me and what I think I want. And let me tell you something. I only see what's in front of me. And I see a wall, and I am absolutely positive I have to get through it. And I'm doing all of these things, inflicting all of my will, trying to get it to go my way. But the deal is that God has the aerial view. And there's a frigging cliff on the other side of the wall. Rejection is God's protection. God is always looking out for my highest good, and yours too. Every situation that I have experienced, every relationship I have is layered in spiritual lessons if I just look for them. And all I want to do is be able to use my experience to help somebody else. And, if I am, the greatest thing that came out of the steps for me in the 4-step was the whole thing about I'm not a victim anymore. I really got a better understanding that spiritually sick people do spiritually sick things. And, but I realized that there was such freedom in the fact that I am not a victim. Because the courage to change the things I can in the Serenity Prayer is my attitude and my actions. I had a coffee commitment early in sobriety. I had, about 60 days of sobriety. And when you're new in the program and you're doing all these new things, a lot of times they describe the pink cloud and then it ends. And what that really was for me was fatigue. When you do, you go to the gym, you start working muscles, eventually you're going to get real tired, right? And so I just had to push through that fatigue. But I was absolutely just beside myself. And I said to this old timer, I said, God, how long do I have to do this for? And he goes, well, do you want the AA answer or do you want the truth? I'm like, okay, both. He goes, the AA answer is that you just keep doing it until you want to do it. He goes, the truth is that you're going to do it every day for the rest of your life. But the kicker is that you have a choice of whether you're going to have a good attitude about it or not. And my head basically blew off the top of my shoulders. I had no idea that I had an option to have a better attitude. That is so friggin' liberating. I'm a feel-good junkie. You need to move me to the solution as fast as humanly possible. My boyfriend, I've been in a loving relationship for 8 years. We've never yelled at each other. We have a rule that I set, which is, I had a feeling that if he met Machete Mouth, all the things would be gone. And so, I grew up in a house where there was a lot of ugly words said, and you can't unring the bell. Even though you said them in anger, it doesn't matter. And I said the rule is that if we're talking about something and we become, basically when it becomes more important for me to be right than to listen to what you have to say, I have no business in that conversation. I have to say, time out, I love you, but I need to go cool down. And I said, I expect that from you. And so I jokingly say, I'm surprised I don't have a crack in my back molar, right? Because sometimes shutting my face is like, oh my God, hard. But I do it, right? Because if I expect, which I do, to be treated with love and respect, I am obligated to show up that way. You guys taught me what that looks like. And I went to the dentist, and she goes, it's not bad and it's not anything you need to be concerned with, but you do have a crack in your back molar. Oh my God, I laughed so hard. She was confused, and I explained why. But the thing is that Alcoholics Anonymous will help you walk through anything. I mean, absolutely anything. And, I suffered with chronic pain for like 20 years. I found a doctor. When I was 25, they wanted to give me a morphine pump to handle my pain. That's how bad my pain was at 25. And I was like, I don't believe that's going to be conducive to long-term sobriety for me. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm quoting myself here, so you're going to have to bear with me. I said, well, I guess I just have to be a bitch then. And that's true, because when you're in pain, you're not exactly friendly. And to this day, people tell me, God, you're so nice. And I'm like, if you even knew how many times I've murdered you in my mind, but you act better than you feel. That's the essence of what the 7-step is. Act better than you feel. And if you can't, get the hell out of there. And so I finally found a doctor that helped me with that. I've had so much medical stuff. It's almost difficult to conceive. In 2001, I had a doctor give me incorrect medicine, and it became toxic in my system. And I fell into a coma for 6 days. And they were telling my parents that I would likely not come out of it, and if I did, I'd be in a vegetative state. When I came out of the coma, I said, how the F did I get here? And my mom's like, she's gonna be okay! And yeah, because it's like that. You hang out with enough sailors, I'm just saying. And I couldn't finish sentences. I would lose my train of thought like 3 times in one sentence. I had brain damage. I was walking with a walker, and it was very significant. And what I realized is that I had still not gotten rid of one thing, because I've learned here that we cannot fix our insides by stuff from the outside. And what happened was, I may have thought very little of myself when I got sober, but the one thing I heard my whole life was that I was really smart. In fact, the other thing I remember from that first dinner was, you can be too smart for this program, kid, you better dumb it down. And I knew he was right. And, I didn't feel smart when I came out of it. I felt like my brain was broken. There were a lot of other deficits that I had. And I had a complete frigging crisis, because I didn't know that I was defining who I was by, well, at least I'm smart, you know what I mean? And that was always the go-to. And then I felt stupid. And I was absolutely, an identity crisis hit me right then and there. And I was praying. And, any really good idea I've ever had comes from God, because I heard another speaker say it, but the brain that creates the problem doesn't have the answer in it unless God lightning bolts in some information for you. And that's what happened. And God said to me that I have value because I breathe air. He's like, the guy that's sitting on death row has value. Buddha, Jesus, if you believe that. More power to you if you do, by the way. And the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, we're all the same. God doesn't make trash. We do. And, the thing about, I had to really focus, and when I would feel the deficit, I would really focus on my breath. And I would tell myself, this too shall pass. Because everything did. Obviously, I worked through it, right? Had a lot of help. And then in 2008, I woke up and 70% of the feeling was gone below my knees. And I thought, well, I've either had a stroke or I have MS, because I'm like a total science nerd. And, but I figured if it was a stroke, it would have only been one side. So I made it over to the hospital, and in a week I had a diagnosis for multiple sclerosis, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a degenerative neurological condition. And my self-care, my physical self-care, became paramount in handling that. And I was on a cane for like a week, 2 weeks. And you know, I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I think I was about 35 years old or something. I can't exactly remember. And I would never, you know, I say things and then I have no memory of saying them. And this girl came up to me. I was waiting. It was that time period, that week before I got the diagnosis. And I went to a meeting because I felt uncomfortable and scared. And I shared. And here's what she told me. Because she came up to me, she saw me like, I don't know, like 6 months later. And she's like, whatever happened with that? I said, oh, I have MS. And she goes, you know, you said something really powerful that day you shared. I'm like, really? And, because like, I don't know what the hell I say. And you said, you know, living in Los Angeles, trying to be like the hottest 35-year-old is like a really tall order. But being the hottest 35-year-old with a cane is a demographic I might be able to compete in. And that's me forced to find the silver lining. And I was fine for a couple of years, and then I had a really significant flare-up in 2010. And I was on a cane for 6 months. And I sometimes fall down. I fell down 3 times last year. I fractured my ankle one of the times. You know, here's the truth. When I travel and I have to go through airports, I use the wheelchair service. Because when I get tired, I'm more prone to falling. And my head wanted to make something of that in the beginning. And then I just did the shift immediately. I'm like, this is my royalty gene, if ever there was one. I'm a effing queen. I'm a queen! And I didn't allow that to dictate my terms of my reality. And here's the truth. I get to cut in line in TSA. It's friggin' great. I have handy-capable parking, or as my Australian friend says, it's paraplegic spastic parking, and which is totally fine. So I get great parking. I mean, there's a lot of like, I don't have to pay parking meters in California, and you know, there's a lot of reasons for me to be grateful for that, because my job is to find the silver lining. And in 2016, a cat found a lump in my chest. Okay, it's a little bit, I have 2 minutes, she's saying. So, all right, here's the story real quick. So I'm cat sitting for my girlfriend who's supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. And I've done this before. The cat would always lay on my lap, and the other cat would lay in between your legs when you lay on the sofa. So this cat, Ivan, kept getting up and laying on my chest. And then I'd move the cat and back on my chest. It happened like 5 times. Finally, I'm like, okay, who cares? Whatever, lay there. And when I went to reach for the remote, because the cat was on me, when I reached, my hand did this. And I felt something weird. And in a week, I had a breast cancer diagnosis. And here's the thing. I have no control over the diagnosis, but what I do with that is 100% up to me. And I said, take them. My body has found something it wants to grow cancer in. They're gone. Build me new ones. I mean, come on, right? I sometimes stand in the mirror, I'm like, seriously though? Oh my God, yay for cancer. And I'm 6 years past, I think about 6 years past breast cancer, right? And the only other thing I want to tell you is that my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sister died of alcoholism. She shot herself. And my parents found out before I did, and I came over to my parents' house. And they were acting extremely weird. And they sat me down and they told me what happened. The first thing I said was, I knew it. Because jails, institutions, and death, this is a fatal effing disease. I wish I could really drop the F-bomb, because I was told, work the steps or effing die. I heard that every day at a meeting. And then God said something. My parents, my dad, he said, oh my God, my baby's gone. And in that moment I said, oh my God, he really does love us. And then we cried, and this is what God did instead. I said, this is the kind of thing that's either going to blow our family apart or bring us closer together. We have to decide as a family right now what we want our outcome to be. And my parents were like lost children. They're like, we want to stay together. I said, okay, this is what's happening. I'm going to come take care of you. I'm making dinner every night. We're going to go for a walk every single day. Because it was the only thing that I could think to do to not be stuck in the grief. Literally one foot in front of the other. And we walked, and we talked, and we cried, and we laughed. And my mom recently told me that she would not have survived that without me. And she said, we were walking all those months, and I was just always looking down, and then one day I realized I was looking up. You have taught me how to act better than myself. I'm so safe. I have nothing in me that has any oh, I can't believe she's crying up there. If you got a problem with me crying up here, it sounds like that would be your problem, not mine. So, just to finish this little story about my sister. So, she died in September of 2011, and her birthday is April 22nd, right? So, we're right around the new year, right? 2012. And my mom says, now mind you, I'm still just getting off the cane, right? All these walks I'm just doing with the cane. And my mom says, there's a half marathon on Tiffany's birthday. It's a trail run, which if you haven't done that, it's a little bit harder. She goes, you want to do it? I'm like, yes, we're doing it. I got these pink shirts. God, to sum up the difference between my sister and I, my sister's favorite color is pink. My favorite color is whore red. And I got the most obnoxiously pink shirts, and I had embroidered on it, Team Tiffany for a healthy mind, body, and spirit. Not anti-suicide. It's a healthy mind, body, and spirit. And we trained, I got this book on how to train for a marathon, and we did half of it. And a couple weeks before, I started to get a cough. And I went to the doctor, and she goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I think I have bronchitis in one lung." She knew me well enough. She says, "Let's go get you a chest x-ray." So the x-ray comes back. I'm like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "You have bronchitis in one lung? I don't know how you know that about yourself." I'm like, "Well, whatever. I have to do this thing for my sister." So antibiotics. So by the time the race day comes, I'm on my second course of antibiotics, and I still do not have good air capacity in one lung. And if I wasn't last place, my mom had to drop out halfway. She started having a problem with her hip, and she was absolutely devastated. I told her, "I'm going to do this for us." And if I wasn't last, I was second to last. I was in such last place that the very last, why do they make a hill on the last part of a run? And it was really steep, and I was out of water. And I wave, because they're literally starting to wrap stuff up. And there's two people there, and she comes running down the hill, and I'm like, "I'm out of water." And she goes, "Here, have mine. There's no more." And there was like that much water. And then I told her, I'm running up the hill, and I'm like, "Oh my God, my sister died, and today's her birthday. We're doing this race for her, and I can only breathe out of one lung. And this woman, God put her there for me because she was like, just keep going. Do not stop. Run, girl, run, run." And it was so hard, but I didn't care. I was gasping for air. And I made it up the hill, and I finished that race for my sister and my parents. I am 100% out of time. You guys, I have no idea what the hell I just said. So, I hope that helps somebody. But I just want you to know, I am like beyond grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. This place, your life can be anything that you want it to be. Just get the hell out of your own way. Thank you guys. I love you.